All right, Nick, let's talk about the Oregon Ducks. May sound strange to some Ducks fans because no, they did not play this weekend, but sometimes it's not about what you do on the field, it is about what you do off the field. And Dan Lanning and co. have been making some big moves off the field for the Ducks. We have a great story, so let's get right on into it and we'll talk about it on the other side, Nick. This is from over on Ducks Wire. Says one of the most obvious benefits of a bye week in college football is the fact that you give your team an opportunity to recuperate and get healthy for the remaining games on the schedule. For Oregon Ducks, that couldn't be more of the case this year because they are facing number 7 Washington, number 13 Washington State, and number 18 Utah in 3 consecutive weeks after the bye. With all of that being said, one of the most underrated aspects of a bye is the opportunity it affords the coaching staff. Rather than staying in town and crunching film all weekend, many teams have their staff go out across the country over the weekend and recruit some of the top players. That's what Dan Lanning and the Ducks did this weekend. On Friday night, Oregon's coaches were seen under Friday night lights across the West Coast and into the Midwest, checking in on some of Oregon's top prospects in the 2024 and 2025 class. Nick, Dan Lanning and co. crushing it in the recruiting game last season and just showing how dedicated they are to getting the upper hand every time they have that available. They went all over. I believe they were in California at Modern Day. They were in Arizona at Sal Point. They're also, Dan Lanning made another move also to Arizona as well to look at slope football to see their potential QB, Luke Moga, who crushed it in his game there as well. They also had another scout on Galena Park in Houston, Texas. So the Ducks looking really, really good. But I want your thoughts on this, Nick. Before we get there, I want to ask the Oregon fans, big game coming up against Washington. It's going to be a huge one. So let us know, what are your predictions for the score in the comment section below. I think this will probably be one of the biggest games of the season, Oregon versus Washington. Let us know your thoughts on what the score will be in the comments below. But Nick, what do you think on Lanning's plan to, not waste the bye week?
So it's one of those things that we forget about college football because we're deep into the season, right? And teams like Oregon, they're competing not just to win conference titles, but potentially to get into college football playoff. And everybody, fans, media, all alike, are so laser focused on winning the next game and eventually working to those end of season goals. But the reality is, when you're a head coach, you have to take the much longer view. You want to build a program that on talent alone can contend for national titles, can contend for conference titles, especially a program like Oregon, who's making a big conference switch in just a few short years. So this is a situation for the Oregon Ducks and Dan Lanning, but they have to, kind of take a step back and say, okay, while we want to focus on the upcoming game and the rest of the season, obviously there's a lot of opportunity for Oregon here. The reality is, if you want to contend year in and year out, recruiting has to be your number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7. Go down the list priority. I think I wouldn't get to game planning until probably about number 10 or 11. Everyone wants to talk about strategies and things like that, and I get it. It matters. But the reality is, the team that has the best players wins 99% of the time. There's a reason Alabama won a lot of football games the past 20 years, is because they generally had the best recruits year in and year out. It is very rare that a program has the best recruits consistently, right? If a program will have a great year, then a down year and things like that. But if you consistently recruit very well, you're going to win a lot of football games. You're going to win 10, 11 games everywhere just on talent alone. That's what the mindset has to be for college head coaches. And some coaches don't do it. They're more X's and O's guys. Lane Kiffin is a great example of that. He came into college football and then the NFL, of course, at Tennessee, at USC, and he was trying to be an X's and O's offensive strategy guy. Totally was a disaster, right? Didn't work. You got to recruit players. Ole Miss, now Lane Kiffin, he's focused much more on recruiting, and he's actually competitive. They're a top 25 program. Dan Lanning, coming from Georgia, recognizes that recruiting is the be-all, end-all, and it's a smart move by him taking care of it. I think this is a great sign for the Oregon Ducks' long-term program health.
Yeah, Nick, and it's showing in spades through the roster, through the potential projections of these classes. You look at the 2024 class, Oregon already ranked number 13 overall there. Going into 2025, ranked number 6, and even all the way to 2026, they have one recruit there. They are the number 4 class in 2026 already. So Oregon looking far ahead, scouting all over the country, into the Midwest, even on the bye week, just trying to see all these top recruits. There's some interesting happenings in the state of Arizona at the South Point High School. They're looking at some defensive end players where one guy's already committed to Arizona, but his teammate, who's very good, was also committed to Arizona but decommitted. So there could be something brewing down there as well. Oregon's on top of that. I think this is a really big move by the Ducks. And just like you said, this is why Dan Lanning and co have been so great so early on, because they've been very focused on the recruiting game. They've shown that's their top priority, and they've done an excellent job. And we've covered it all this past offseason, just how many great recruits they've gotten so far. So I'm excited to see how this boost through the offseason maybe can convert into some recruits committing to Oregon. And I think this is going to give them a big boost for the next couple of years.
And here's the thing I really want to keep an eye on from an Oregon perspective, obviously moving over to the Big Ten. But if they can be still the dominant recruiting force on the West Coast, or one of the dominant recruiting forces, that could be scary for their opponents in the Big Ten, because Big Ten is much more old school football. They do like to play a lot more power. Iowa, Minnesota, Northwestern, Indiana, schools like that, Wisconsin. If Oregon can get some of that West Coast speed into the Big Ten, I think only maybe Michigan and Ohio State are the only programs that could be able to run with them on speed alone. And of course, they'll be able to compete for power and quarterback play as well. So not only is it a great decision just in terms of roster building, setting up your program for long-term success, it'd also be a big help for them when they transfer over to the Big Ten shortly. So no matter how you look on it, this is a really smart decision by Dan Lanning. And this is why you brought him up to Eugene. This is exactly why you bring a guy from the SEC up to coach the Oregon Ducks.